You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. And this is a special show. This is our last show before this break. And we'll be on hiatus for a few weeks. And then we'll be back. But this is special because I was thinking a lot about this show and thinking, it bodes to be grim, and I'm so tired of being grim. It's a bore. Well, Trump's a bore. The whole situation is a bore, yes. Well, anyway, I thought, it's going to get worse and worse and worse before it gets better, and what are we going to do? And then I came up with the right antidote. So, before we do anything else, we need to go way inside and come out the other side of the headlines. So this is what I thought when I thought of going inside the headlines. I thought, there's going to be months of this, 4 years if we're unlucky. And that's just intolerable. I mean, you think it's bad now. I think it's bad now. We get depressed, we get desolate, we get many things, and none of them are cheerful. And yet, he's only begun to propose cabinet members like RFK Jr. and Tracy Gabbard, and they just get worse and worse and worse. The new head of the FBI, Flash or Dash or whoever. Anyway, they're all pretty awful, and he hasn't even begun with bills yet, and legislation and executive actions, and there'll be things that will tempt us toward madness, and we don't really want to go there. We'd like to be around for some kind of survival. If the planet can make it through, then we ought to be able to try. So, there's this. There is something to think about that's quite profound and very simple and really complicated. It was the original piece that it is based on was published in the print edition of the New Yorker in October 21st of last year, 2024. That issue, October 21st, with the headline, Pecking Order. And it was a piece of how scientists started to decode birdsong. But it was written by Rivka Gulchin. And I did a double take, and I thought, that'll be interesting, I think, to look at. And maybe it was because of my name, I don't know, but I really fell hard for this article. So I'm going to read you parts of it and chatter as well, and I think it will change fundamentally the way that you might view everything. You know how fixated I am on etymology, and how I always look to the sources of words, because therein lies not only their history, but their future in another way. And this is another way of doing just that. We'll take a short break here so that we don't have to take many breaks along the way, and I'll take one break in the middle, and then we'll just forge ahead. Subscribe to this program on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at WMC Live, like our Facebook page at facebook.com/WMC Live, and visit us at WMCLive.com for more information about our show and our guests.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
This is from How Scientists Started to Decode Bird Song. It was written by Rivka Gulchin, and it ran in the print edition of the New Yorker last October. And I'm basing some of the comments from the piece and some of them on the piece. So, on a drizzly day in Grunau im Almtal, Austria, a gaggle of grey-legged geese shared a peaceful moment on a grassy field near a stream. One goose, named Edith, was preening quietly. Others were resting with their beaks pointed tailward, nestled into their feathers. Then a camouflaged speaker that scientists had placed nearby started to play. First came a recorded honk from an unpartnered male goose named Joshua. Edith went on with his preening. Next came a honk that was lower in pitch than the first, with a slight bray. Edith looked up. As the other geese remained tucked in their warm positions, incurious, Edith scanned the field. He had just heard a recorded distance call from his life partner, a female goose whom scientists had named Bon Jovi. Edith and his fellow geese lived near the Konrad Lorenz Research Center for Behavior and Cognition, which is named for a Nobel laureate whose imprinting experiments in the 1930s convinced goslings that he was their mother. They took to following him in a downy line. Grey-lag geese in the area have been studied continually ever since. The director of the center, a biologist and bird ecologist named Sonja Kleindorfer, showed me footage of Edith to demonstrate the subtlety of goose communication. Geese maintain elaborate social structures, travel in family groups, and can navigate from Sweden to Spain. In a fight, an unpartnered grey-lag goose has a higher heart rate than a partnered one, and the heart rate of a recently widowed goose can remain depressed for about a year. These birds have things to discuss. Still, geese are not the Ciceros of the bird world. A lyrebird sings long, elaborate songs. Ravens really can say nevermore. Geese are known for nasal honks. How much nuance can there be in a honk? Grey-lag geese, it turns out, have at least 10 different kinds of calls. We're completely underappreciating the way they communicate, Kleindorfer told me. They give a departure call when they leave and a contact call after they arrive. They know if their allies are there, if the bold geese are there. There is so much information that geese are getting from calls. But vocalizations are usually divided into songs and calls. But these are wobbly categories. What is designated a song in one species of bird may be shorter in duration than what in another species is termed a call. Onomatopoetic groupings such as tsiits, chirrups, rayus, sui-sois, and das are also indeterminate. People transcribe the same sounds in different ways, and no bird version of the Académie Française exists to adjudicate. The vocalizations of birds are fundamentally incommensurate with human ones. We have a larynx and 2 vocal cords. They have what's called a syrinx, which is a bit like having 2 larynxes that you can use at the same time. Kleindorfer, the daughter of a mathematician and an actress, looks like a cross between a hiker and the film star Sophia Loren. From February to April, she researches Darwin's finches in the Galapagos. From September to December, songbirds in Australia. And for the rest of the year, the geese outside her office door. Early in her education, as an undergraduate at the University of Pennsylvania, she was taught that, quote, male songbirds sing, females don't, and if females do sing, it's an error. The attitude at the time, she told me, was that females are drab, inconspicuous, and quiet. A few years after earning a Ph.D. in zoology at the University of Vienna, Kleindorfer took a job as a research biologist at Flinders University in Australia, where songbird species originally evolved. Imagine my surprise, she told me. I heard all these females singing songs as complex as the male songs. Much of her ensuing career has focused on bird vocalizations that were either underappreciated or unknown. Kleindorfer decided to study bird eggs and early development, which were then neglected research topics. Maybe this was because only females have eggs and I was a woman in science, she said. I don't have a better reason. Kleindorfer noticed that mustached warbler chicks seemed to respond to the alarm calls of adult warblers, even though the thinking at the time was that such calls were directed at other adults, or possibly at predators. If I put a snake nearby, the paternal or the parental alarm call made the chicks in a nest jump. If I put a marsh harrier, a hawk-like predatory bird, nearby, the response to the parental alarm call was that the chicks would duck. The chicks were responding appropriately to different alarm calls. Quite a satisfying finding. Well, Kleindorfer also studied the superb fairy wren, a songbird that waves about as much as a walnut and sports a flirty, upright tail. Despite their fancy names, fairy wrens are commonplace in Australia. They are socially monogamous, but sexually promiscuous. They are essentially in open marriages, and they bring up their young collectively. Arguably, they have even more to chat about than geese do. Fairy wren nests are about the size of cupped human hands, built to contain pale, speckled eggs that are smaller than thumbnails. Kleindorfer and her team wired up nests with cameras and microphones and soon discovered something they had not known to look for. The mothers in nests were producing an incubation call, a call to the eggs, she said. It was like a lullaby. Why would a mother bird make any sound that could attract predators to the nest? Well, songbird embryos don't have well-developed ears, so this was completely unexpected, she said. That started a 20-year project. Why is the mother calling to the eggs? The team compared incubation calls to the begging calls of young chicks. It was very odd, Kleindorfer recalled. Each nest had its own distinct begging call. What's more, each begging call matched an element from the mother's incubation call. This suggested, startlingly, that birds could learn a literal mother tongue while still in ovo. Humans do this too. French and German babies, by the way, have distinctly different cries. Even so-called foster chicks, who as eggs were physically moved from one nest to another, learned begging calls from their foster mothers rather than from their genetic mothers. This was big news in the ornithology world. The paradigm of how songbirds learn after hatching from their father's song was completely overthrown, she said. The same process was soon documented in more songbird species. Language is often cited as the quality that distinguishes us as humans. When I asked Robert Berwick, an MIT computational linguist, about birds, he argued they're not trying to say anything in the sense of James Joyce trying to say something. Well, I'm just saying, I would hope not. Still, he and Kleindorfer both pointed out that humans and songbirds share a trait many animals lack. We are vocal learners, meaning that we can learn to make new sounds throughout our lives. Bats, whales, dolphins, and elephants can also. To me, the most amazing thing is that every generation of vocal learners has its own sound, Kleindorfer said. So, just like our English is different from Shakespeare's English, the songbirds, too, have very different songs from 500 years ago. I'm sure of it. We humans have long tried, often mistakenly, to differentiate ourselves from non-human animals by arguing that only we have souls, or use tools, or are capable of self-awareness. Perhaps we should see what the birds have to say. Animals have prominent speaking roles in many of our oldest stories. Eve has a memorable conversation with a snake, In Norse mythology, two ravens, Hugin and Munin, serve as spies to the god Odin, whispering to him the news of the world. In many cultures, the language of birds refers to a divine or perfect language, the language of angels. In the scientific realm, however, the notion that non-human animals use language is often seen as foolish or naive. Although some birds may be excellent mimics, like parrots, they can also mimic chainsaws or barking dogs. So the prevailing dogma is that birds sing either to impress mates or defend their territory. And I suspect that most of human communication could also be slotted into those categories. Even among species we view as being closer to ourselves, such as primates, scientists have tended to talk about communication instead of language. But it's tricky to say where the line is, or what we mean by communication, since even bacteria communicate. It's best to think of language not as speech, says Berwick, but as a cognitive ability in the mind that sometimes leads to speech, giving the example, he says, of inward conversations we have with ourselves. Over the years, however, some researchers have looked closely at the contexts in which certain animal vocalizations are made. In the late 1970s, two primatologists, Dorothy Cheney and Robert Seyfarth, were studying vervet monkeys in Kenya. Vervets have dark faces and pale fur. They are about the size of a small backpack and are hunted by pythons, eagles, and leopards. Cheney and Seyfarth documented something remarkable. One recorded vervet vocalization made vervets look up, presumably for eagles. Another made them look down, presumably for pythons. And a third sent them running into the trees, a good defense against approaching leopards. Young vervets sometimes use these calls faultily, sometimes perhaps sounding a leopard alarm for a warthog, but they get better as they grow up. They learn. A newer generation of scientists has been trying to understand bird vocalizations. The alarm calls of Siberian jays can be said to have been partially translated. One of their screeches indicates a sitting hawk, which prompts other jays to come together in a group. Another, a flying hawk. Jays hide, which makes them difficult to spot. And a third, a hawk actively attacking. Jays fly to the treetops to search for the attacker and possibly to flee. When cheery birds known as tufted titmice make a piercing sound, other titmice may respond by collectively harrying an invading predator. Some birds even lie. Fork-tailed drongos, common, innocuous-looking little dark birds that live in Africa, sometimes mimic the alarm calls of starlings or meerkats. Duped listeners flee the non-existent threat, leaving behind a buffet for the drongo. Upon seeing an owl, a chickadee might sound a loud chickadee-dee-dee-dee-dee, adding D's in relation to how dangerous the predator is perceived to be. This call is also understood by nuthatches, which will join in to mob and harass the predator, forming a kind of defensive alliance. If you record an Australian bird warning of a nearby cuckoo, cuckoos leave their eggs in the nests of other species and often kill their step-siblings, birds in China will understand the call. Kleindorfer considers Cheney and Seyfarth, the primatologists, to be important sources of inspiration. After she moved to Australia, she and her colleagues built up a sound library of Australian songbirds. They also made recordings of quieter, familial bird sounds, such as the incubation calls. Each family unit, they discovered, had its own familect, a system of sounds the chicks learned from their parents. Curiously, chicks seemed to adopt sounds sung either by their mother or by their father, but they avoided the sounds used by both parents. If the mother sings A, B, C, X, Y, Z, and the father sings A, B, C, G, H, I, then the chicks tend to sing the sound units X, Y, Z, G, H, and I. It's as if the young birds separate themselves from their parents by not speaking the shared sounds, but also stay close to their parents by learning what's unique to mom and dad. And when female chicks grow up, they're attracted to mates whose repertoire is familiar. He's one of us, but not too familiar. He's not my brother or my father. Birds in general are turning out to have intellectual abilities far greater than most people ever imagined. It's not just that parrots and crows can do math as ably as young children, or that scrub jays cleverly cache and then uncache food to fool other jays. Even unconspicuous and uncelebrated birds are capable of learning and of sharing their learning with others. In the 1920s, tits from Swathling, England, figured out how to open the caps of milk bottles, and by the late 40s, tits across Ireland, Wales, and England had learned the trick. If language is more a capacity than it is a speech act, it seems quite possible that birds possess it. In 1989, Ludwig Paul Koch, an 8-year-old boy in Frankfurt, Germany, received a present from his father, an Edison phonograph and some wax cylinders for recording sounds. The oldest known audio of birdsong is young Koch's recording of his white-rumped shema, a smallish songbird with a dark head, an orange body, and feathers that resemble a white bustle on its glossy black tail. A shema sings like a small chamber orchestra, with slippery, percussive, and sweet sounds in phrases of varying lengths. Many similar recordings followed. In 1929, the Cornell Library of Natural Sounds, now the Macaulay Library, was started, with a few hard-won recordings of a sparrow, a wren, and a grosbeak. Cornell is now to ornithology what Juilliard School is to music. Koch, who was Jewish, became a professional musician but fled Germany in the 1930s. In England, he became a beloved presence on BBC Radio, and singing like a sing-song, sanguine sibling of Werner Herzog, he told listeners, frequently called me by my Christian name, Ludwig. Koch often expressed the hope that such recordings might be used for science. Many years later, they were. Well, then follows a long section that I will skip over, which was about the creation of this laboratory and this great library of birdsong, which eventually helped the Cornell Lab of Ornithology develop Merlin Bird ID, an app that could reliably identify several hundred species of bird from photographs. It proved immensely popular, but the Cornell team always kept saying, well, how do we do this with sound, which seemed much more important to them. And then they had an epiphany. Sound recognition, often relied on spectrograms, visual representations of sounds similar to what you see in audio editing software. Once people figured out how to visualize sound, actually take measures of it, that led to an explosion of research. An early test could differentiate between recordings of older flycatchers and willow flycatchers. By 2021, the number of bird recordings in the Macaulay Library, many of which were submitted by citizen scientists, reached 1 million. That same year, Cornell released Merlin Sound ID, which was originally trained on around 250 hours of bird songs, as well as on background noises, whistling wind, passing cars, all manually annotated by experts. At first, Sound ID could identify about 300 different North American birds, with a bias toward those found around Cornell. 3 years and 1 million additional recordings later, Sound ID can now very accurately identify about 1,400 species, and the lab hopes that number can grow roughly to around 8,000 out of around 11,000 known bird species. Okay, hurry up. Get your coffee or your soda or your drink or whatever, or run to the bathroom and go and pee, and then come right back. The Women's Media Center, founded in 2005 by Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, and myself, is a progressive, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to make women visible and powerful in media. You can learn more about the WMC at womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
We'll now continue with the awe-inspiring story of birdsong. Well, most of the database is songs in the library, but they can now understand the songs at a level that they couldn't before. But something like nest chatter, which is quieter and less predictable, is more elusive, and there are whole categories of bird communication that they haven't even started to look at. Social birds, for example, are constantly chatting to one another, making little noises, often very quietly. It's like they're having a whisper conversation. What are they saying to each other? They would really like to know, the scientists. So, until the author of this piece, until her 11-year-old daughter became interested in birds, she barely knew a starling from a sparrow. But the child once asked her mother, incredulously, you can't tell a male sparrow from a female. So, but then they started to use Merlin Bird ID. Now, anthropomorphism is a familiar term that describes a common error, the assumption that animals have human qualities. A less familiar term, anthropectomy, also describes a kind of error, that of baselessly assuming animals don't share certain qualities with us. What kind of error is a person more likely to make? Or are these not errors, but rather starting points? With somebody like Jane Goodall, for example, starting from the premise that 98.7% of our DNA is shared with chimps, and someone else starting from the fact that we humans have sequenced our own DNA and no other species has even invented pliers. Since we're still arguing about what language is, it's difficult to say which assumption about animal language is more presumptuous. Toshitaka Suzuki first started to wonder if birds speak their own language during his last year of college at Toho University in Tokyo. He was on a hike in the forests of Karuizawa when he witnessed what struck him as a strange drama among some common Japanese tits, birds that resembled chickadees. One tit called out "dee-dee-dee" near some scattered sunflower seeds. Other tits flew over and began to eat. Then one bird called out "hee-hee-hee," and all birds flew into nearby bushes. He could see no reason for them to abandon their feast. Seconds later, a sparrowhawk swooped in. All of the tits had escaped safely. Suzuki said, "I thought maybe hee-hee-hee means hawk coming. Run away." He already took birds seriously and knew a lot about them. He had studied under Hiroshi Hasegawa, a scientist central in bringing the short-tailed albatross back from near extinction. But Suzuki had thought of bird vocalizations as, for the most part, emotive, like music, or as a kind of beautiful nonsense. He has now devoted 18 years to researching tits and their communication. I couldn't have imagined how long I would be studying tits, because I love other animals as well, Suzuki says. Like many researchers, he hopes that the more we understand birds, the likelier we are to protect them. In April 2023, at the University of Tokyo, Suzuki founded what he calls the world's first laboratory, specifically devoted to animal linguistics. He argues that more work should be done to explore what cognitive abilities underlie human language and then to investigate whether these abilities are present in animals. In many ways, this approach mirrors the work of Berwick and Chomsky, but leads to different conclusions. Some are skeptical of his push to compare animal communication to human language. It's so far removed from the complexity of human language, it doesn't make sense to use the same word. Todd Freeberg, an animal communication researcher at the University of Tennessee, said, "When a chickadee amplifies a call by adding Ds, some researchers might say that they're engaging in referential signaling by adjusting their call to the seriousness of the threat. But Freeberg points out that extra Ds could also be a result of heightened arousal in general, less a conscious message than a physical response." Like Kleindorfer, Suzuki took an interest in nests. Early on, he showed that chicks in nesting boxes respond to a call associated with crow sightings by crouching, and to a call associated with snakes by fleeing the nest altogether. The arc of Suzuki's research has, to some extent, followed a series of arguments about what qualities are required for communication to rise to the status of language. Humans are noted for their ability to form a mental image, a concept, of what they are communicating. Suzuki designed an experiment in which he played a variety of calls and moved a stick in a variety of ways. Only when he played a snake alarm call and moved a stick in a snake-like way did the birds tend to react as if a snake was present. To him, this suggested that they had some concept of snakeness. He said that the experiment was inspired by the way humans perceive shapes in clouds. In a 2023 study, Suzuki showed that tits responded differently to a recorded ABCD call than they did to a remixed version of the call, such as DABC. A potential challenge to linguists who see sophisticated syntax as being unique to human language. Studies of southern pied babblers and of chestnut-crowned babblers also have interesting syntax results. Symbolic gestures, often considered unique to humans, were addressed in a particularly adorable Suzuki paper in 2024. His team watched mated pairs of tits as they entered their nest boxes. The opening to each nest box was small, allowing only one bird at a time to pass. But sometimes one bird, usually the female, fluttered its wings in what seemed to be an "after you" gesture. The other bird would then enter the box first. The fluttering didn't point the next box. It didn't point the box out. In Suzuki's zoo view, this suggested that the flutter was not a simple indication, but instead a symbolic gesture, another item crossed off on the unique to human language list. Perhaps the nest box study needs to be replicated. Perhaps there are alternative interpretations of the result in the concept and syntax studies. Suzuki is open to such critiques, but he's also skeptical of many prominent ideas in linguistics, such as Chomsky and Berwick's argument that a slight evolutionary change in the brain unlocked a new linguistic capacity in humans, the unique and powerful ability to connect individual units in a hierarchical and expressive way. Suzuki thinks that language more likely emerged bit by bit. By Suzuki's latest count, the tit's vocal repertoire has more than 200 distant and distinct calls and phrases, and he has many more experiments to conduct. So, the piece ends with an outing that the author and her daughter take to have a bird sighting, but they find it's more bird listening. And then she notes, the quiet of the pandemic brought natural sounds to the foreground for a woman named Maddie Cuisamano. who then was a graduate researcher of auditory perception at MIT's Center for Brains, Minds, and Machines. Didn't know there was such a thing, did you? Like a lot of people, she says, I had the sense of getting to know the birds around me for the first time. 2 doves were often visible from her window. She read that in some dove pairs, one bird sings to the other in the mornings, and in the evenings the roles reverse. Quismano was familiar enough with machine learning that when she tried out bird identification apps, she thought, I could help make this kind of thing. Well, she's now a senior scientist specializing in AI research at the Earth Species Project, ESP, a nonprofit dedicated to using artificial intelligence to decode non-human communication. ESP's current efforts early work has been preoccupied with preliminary challenges, the cocktail party problem of picking up individual sounds in a noisy environment, how to correlate particular noises with the precise contexts in which they occur. It's like we want to write the Magna Carta, but first we need to make the quill, Katie Zakarian, the organization's co-founder and CEO, says. Zakarian isn't expecting a Google Translate for animal languages, but she does believe that there is this underlying current in the work of decoding. Those who live and work alongside animals, whether they're scientists or not, often think, as a matter of course, that animals can speak with one another and in depth. Instead of being surprised by the discovery of each unexpected animal ability, perhaps we should be surprised that humans have such low expectations. Many of us laugh or shake our heads sadly when we read that Descartes supposedly threw a cat out of a window to see if it would show fear as a sort of test for consciousness. He believed that non-human animals were senseless automatons. Yet many of us would also consider it a wonder that, according to a recent study, elephants seem to have distinct names for one another, which their elephant friends and family use among themselves. We have to take one more break, but then I will return directly with some fighting words.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, it's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Talk radio with a brain.
Perhaps we should exile the phrase bird brains from our vocabularies. You think? Those are fighting words. Well, if all that decoding of birdsong didn't fill you with some sense of awe, I don't quite know what will. It did for me. There I was, mournful and depressed and unable to break surface. And then I remembered that somebody once said to me that curiosity was the heart of being alive. I don't remember who said it, or someone wrote it. And it's true, I believe it, because curiosity motivates us to do anything. And if you're not curious, what's the point? So I was very depressed because after the election, well, it seemed everything, including the planet, was doomed. And I wasn't curious about any of it. I knew exactly what they were going to do. I knew exactly what they were going to say. And it was so bloody boring. So what was the point? What was the point in staying alive to hear it or see it? But you return curiosity to me, even through a slat open in a window, even through a chink in the door, even through a tiny slant of light. And all of it comes rushing back. The sense of awe, the wonder, the things we don't know. We know so little, and we're so pathetically impoverished. That's one of the reasons we're so furious at Trump, because he's even more impoverished than we are. Well, let's make something of ourselves then. Let's challenge each other and ourselves, most of all ourselves, to get off the couch and out of the bed and into the world again. Yes, again, and laugh at it. And laugh. There comes laughter. One by one they troop in, bedraggled, a little bit threadbare. But here. We can do this. We'll have to do it. And so we will. We will, despite Musk and Bezos and Trump and all of their stupid selves, who can only think to colonize the universe. They can't think what else to do with it. They don't know what it will do with them. And we don't either, but we have suspicions. And it's not just for the birds. So I wish you a happy break. And when you get up and feel yourself still down, think about the birds. Think about how they're all, along with the elephants and the vervets, along with the giraffes and the lions and the baboons and the chimps, and all of them speaking their own languages, which we can't even imagine. They're thinking their own languages. They're thinking it, and we can't hear it yet. But maybe if we live long enough, maybe if we try hard enough, we'll be able to get an inkling. Maybe if we stay alive and fight the Musks and the Bezoses, the Trumps and the silly boys, we'll be able to build a green and pleasant land in this third rock from the sun planet. I'm game to try, if you are. See you after the break. And that's our show for this week. You can follow me on social media at The Robin Morgan. You can check out my blog at robinmorgan.net, and you can find my new novel, Parallax, and my just-out new book of poems, Harvesting Darkness, wherever books are sold. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Views expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Executive producer, as well as founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. WMC president and co-executive producer for this program, Julie Burton. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Join us next time on Women's Media Center Live.